Designing a course can be challenging sometimes because when you finish a topic, there's a number of directions you can go after that topic. But if you have an overarching idea that you want to get to eventually, you're going to have to kind of leave some important thoughts on the side and come back to them later. And that's really what's going to happen in the next 4 or 5 lessons or so. These are topics that could have easily been covered much earlier in the course, but because I was trying to get somewhere, I left those details off till now. So hopefully you don't mind that we're going to circle back and fill in or backfill some of the topics that we just didn't cover in a lot of depth. And the first that I want to talk about are these terms truthy and falsy, which seem to be specific to JavaScript. I haven't seen them used in other programming languages. Maybe I just haven't looked at the right programming language. But basically, it has to do with evaluation. So when you evaluate an expression, like for example in an if statement or in a switch, and you perform an evaluation of expressions, sometimes they're going to return absolute true or false. 1 is greater than 2. That is false, patently false. And I would expect that I would get from that expression the false value. But then there are other things that are not quite as obvious. And there are rules in JavaScript that dictate whether an expression is truthy. It's in and of itself, it doesn't look like it would be true, but because of the rules of JavaScript, it is true. And things that are falsy, it doesn't look like it would be false, but based on the rules of JavaScript, we're going to call it false. All right. And so if you just don't know what those are, you're going to maybe perform or evaluate an expression, you're going to get a true or a false, and you're going to be like, what in the world's going on there? Why is that true? Why is that false? So I want to cover these cases, and I hope you don't mind that I'm just going to copy and paste these right in because it's a pretty big chunk of code, and we'll just look at these things. But in the top, these are things that are falsy. Well, right off the bat, in line number 1, if you're going to evaluate an expression, if false, that's always going to be false. That's not really falsy. It's just false. All right. But then there are things like null, if null. Well, in and of itself, null, if we're looking at this completely subjectively, null is not true or false. It doesn't really have a connotation of being true or false. It's just null. We'll talk about null later. However, it's considered by JavaScript to be a falsy value. Same with undefined. Undefined is not good or bad. It's not true or false. But JavaScript says that if something pops up and after evaluating an expression, it comes to undefined, that's going to be a false value. The same with the number 0. If an expression is evaluated and what's output is the number 0, that is a falsy value. It will return false in that expression. Same thing with not a number. Same thing with an empty string, whether you use in lines 6 or 7, single quotes or double quotes to define your string. Now, everything else is pretty much truthy. In fact, I don't even know if there's the notion of truthy in JavaScript. It's just everything that's not in falsy is essentially truthy. But I gave you some examples here. Obviously, just like if false is falsy, if true is going to be truthy. It's just true. But things like an empty object, if you evaluate an expression and it returns an empty object, for the purpose of truthy and falsy, it's truthy. Same thing with an empty array. Same thing with a string that's not empty. So we saw empty strings are falsy, but a string, if you have something in it, it's truthy. Okay, a new instance of an object is truthy. Even though there's nothing associated with, there's no properties or methods, doesn't matter, truthy. Same thing with any non-zero value, whether it be an integer or a float, which means values after the decimal point, those are all truthy, as is a constant in JavaScript called infinity, whether positive or negative infinity, all truthy values. So here again, if you ever come across something in an evaluation, it returns an odd value that doesn't strictly return true or false. It returns null or undefined or not a number or 0 or an empty string, falsy. It's going to the evaluation of that expression will be false. But everything else is pretty much going to return true. Okay, that's all I needed to say in this video. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.